Hey Josh, firstly, thank you for joining us today, taking part in this video series that we're putting together looking at agentic AI and AI agents. Well, welcome to the conversation.
Thanks for having me on, Trevor. Looking forward to it.
It's certainly one of those interesting topics that we're going to dive into, and hopefully the angle that we're approaching on this will be slightly different to what we're seeing. So let me kind of outline where we're going to take this. So
Yeah.
there's been a lot written about agentic AI and AI agents, but the vast majority of what I've been reading seems to be focused on how this is going to be impacting the traveler or
Mhm.
how the hotels can actually be utilizing it to their benefit or to their guests as well. What I haven't seen a lot of is it being discussed as impact on guys like yourself, the actual hotel tech providers.
Right,
And
right.
and so where we want to start, and there's a number of questions and areas we want to evolve. But first of all, it seems the most logical place is to start with, let's look at what opportunities does agentic AI and AI agents provide for companies like yourselves, and then we'll look at the threats in a moment. But let's start off. What opportunities does this present? How are you guys looking at agentic AI agents from an internal perspective?
Right. Well, won't someone just think of the poor tech providers? I mean, after all, it's
It
it's
would be nice, wouldn't it?
exactly. Look, I mean, I think what's important to set as a baseline is that this is not a hospitality like tech hype cycle. I've seen hype cycles, right?
Hmm.
I mean, I remember all of our bookings were going to come from a social media booking engine, and then, of course, all of the CRS systems were all going to move to blockchain, and then we were all going to make millions selling NFTs for hotels, two hotels or whatever. Look, those
And there was
were
metaverse where we're all going to be buying land in a virtual world.
right, right. I mean, those, as I like to say it, those were carbon fiber horseshoes for the same broken down horse, right?
Got you. Yeah,
But
yeah, yeah.
this is really a whole different world. We're moving from a world of data on a screen to a world of automated, intelligent actions that drive profitability, right?
Hmm.
And so the era of AI driven operations is really here. So I think the opportunities for tech providers, there's a couple of them. One, we're going to see a shift from providing tools to partners. I think you're really going to start to see, that shift, and it'll play out in a whole bunch of different ways. You'll see more platform plays. I think we can talk about that a little bit more.
Hmm.
And you're going to see tech providers hopefully start to focus on really actionable AI solutions. In other words, tools that solve specific high value problems. So, for example, our signals tool, right, uses causal AI to identify what truly drives booking decisions,
Hmm.
helping hotels achieve really high forecast accuracy rates, like 96% forecast accuracy, 180 days out,
Well.
and doing those competitive recommendations. So
Hmm.
I think that's really interesting to do. And then lastly, I think AI really, look, there's a lot of potential downsides to AI for sure.
Hmm.
I don't consider myself a doomer or a boomer. I think I sort of sit, or a zoomer, I think they call them.
I can't remember which one. Yeah, I know there's a
It's
phrase for
somewhere
it.
in the middle. But we talk about how, tech providers, can we democratize technology, give smaller properties access to some of those big tools? And I think, if you're a company that's looking to build a unified AI layer for hospitality, right?
Hmm.
That's the kind of thing that if you can do that right and provide that to all lodging businesses and really help them tackle major challenges like labor shortages, high commission costs,
Yeah.
going to be really powerful.
That makes a lot of sense. And I think I read an article recently. I think it was last week. So forgive me, but that as a company, you are also utilizing this technology in house as well. So I mean, you've spoken about the opportunities for hotel tech providers looking outwards, but also you guys are using it looking inwards as well.
Yeah, Adam had a great, I think it was a Focusrite article around that. And it's funny. one of the reasons I joined Cloudbeds was when I was looking for a new role, I was specifically looking for a company that was in growth mode, but growth mode through innovation, not just
Hmm.
acquisition.
Hmm.
And so, Adam, it's funny. Adam doesn't work at Cloudbeds in 2025. Adam works at Cloudbeds in 2030.
Yeah.
And so he, got into AI as being a really powerful tool to help make our business more efficient.
Hmm.
So while we were sort of thinking long term about how we could actionably and smartly infuse AI for the benefits of our customers, we were full steam running experiments internally and turning on Gemini across our enterprise data.
Hmm.
So even for a conversation like this, right, I can go to our Gemini instance and say, help me prep for this conversation with Trevor. Find Adam's prep notes from other interviews and
Wow.
help me sort of speak more like Trevor. I'm sorry, more like
Well,
Adam
Adam,
when I'm
yeah, yeah.
talking to Trevor, right? And so things like that, how we're starting to use AI when it comes to making our sales teams more efficient and effective. I'm not as connected to our developers
Sure.
because hey, I'm the guy with the big mouth, not the big brain, right? But I know that they're using it in all kinds of really amazingly smart ways.
Yeah, it's interesting to see. And as a couple of companies have been talking about looking internally and how they're utilizing it, they just caught my eye. I think you're right. It was a Focusrite article last week.
Yeah.
Let's flip the coin, because we always hear from, well, any supplier, if I put a generic term in that way, about all the positives and what it can do and all the value, but there's always two sides of a coin. AI agents, agentic AI. What are some of the threats it might pose to the actual hotel tech providers as a broad, if we look at it as a broad spectrum of providers, because there's a lot of different players in there, lots of different solutions, lots of different sizes of companies as well. What's your kind of take on that? And I know we're kind of future gazing a little bit, looking ahead a few years and how it
Yeah.
might impact them.
Well, for sure. And I think there's sort of four key threats that I see, right?
Hmm.
One is the risk, just a flat out risk of irrelevance, right? And
Yep.
providers who are not meaningfully integrating AI into their platforms just
Hmm.
risk becoming obsolete, right? I mean, uh, flat out.
Yep.
We've talked about fragmentation
Hmm.
in hospitality tech, and you see a lot of really amazing creative companies that have a solution, right? They see a problem, they create a platform for it, but that model of sort of, you know, having all of these point solutions. Keep in mind, the average hotel uses nearly 20 different data systems,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Average. Some of them are like, closer to 100. So those disconnected data, it really hinders performance. So what you're going to see is real consolidation pressure, right?
Hmm.
And I think in the age of AI, data silos are no longer just inefficiencies, they're revenue killers,
Yep.
right? And hotels are going to look for either unified, if not maybe not necessarily unified platforms, like one platform that does it all, but a platform that can actually truly integrate all of these things,
Hmm.
whether it's with open APIs, MCP calls, whatever it might be, right? And create that truly seamless ecosystem. Because tech that doesn't communicate with a hotel's other system is going to create friction and will not survive.
Yeah. That makes sense. So I guess what we have seen, and thinking about your role in the company, I guess what we have seen is that data has gone from being something that, I'm going to phrase this completely wrong, but hopefully you'll catch it. Rather than something that we did something with or it existed, it now has just become like the lifeblood, the oxygen of the, and if you look at it in that way, that is your starting point, and that
Mhm.
drives everything, and everything is built on that data platform. And I that's what I wanted to ask you, that in a way, if we're going down that path, do we see a scenario where, I mean, there are other companies, and I've been talking to people that I know in some of the major consultancies, where they're working with large corporate entities, and they're building on their data sets
Mm,
agentic AIs, AI agents. So you've then got, on one hand, you've got these hotel tech companies that exist, that have their products, that they sell those solutions, and yeah, they all talk through the APIs and connect up. But if you suddenly start to see hoteliers are developing a clean, consolidated
right.
pool of data, that would seem to also open up a threat of businesses that are already established of developing these AI agents to then come in and say, well, look, hold on, you don't need all these different pieces that all talk to each other. You've got the data. We'll just build your agents on top of it. I mean, that would seem, going forward 3, 4, 5 years, because there's a lot of stops to get there. But that would seem like also another potential threat.
Well, there's a couple of things that'll, I think, make that potentially challenging, right?
Yeah.
One is cost models. I think a lot of these, and I've worked for some of them, right? External, so we'll call them non-industry companies.
Mm-hmm.
And is that I think there's a real lack of understanding of how the hotel industry is actually a whole series of small businesses
Mm-hmm.
cobbled together with different financial interests. And even if you look at the biggest brands, the vast majority of properties within the largest brands are owned by small family-run companies.
Yeah.
But even more fundamentally than that structure, the financial structures of the industry, the problem with generic AI models is that not only are they not built for the needs of hospitality, they just don't speak the language. And by not speaking the language, I mean that the number of tokens that are used to train the leading LLMs, right, is infinitesimally small. It's like 0.04% of tokens that have that train those models are hospitality tokens, right? And then you
Right.
compare that to like healthcare, finance, which are like in the mid-teens,
Yeah.
right? So they don't have the specific context to be truly effective. So look, the AI revolution in hospitality won't be televised from the outside. It'll be coded from within,
Got you.
right? And it's going to be about leveraging deep industry knowledge to build those kind of intelligent systems to solve real world problems. Now, does that mean that generic hotel tech company X can do that? Not necessarily, right?
Mm-hmm.
You need to be actually you need to have already been thinking about this, already be experimenting things, and keep in mind that a lot of these hotel tech companies don't have access to large, clean data sets,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, look, I'm not saying we're perfect, we're not, but we're building our own causal neural frontier model, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's trained on our massive clean data set. And so I think that is how we're looking to deliver meaningful results because we don't want to just have AI, right? We want to have AI that's deeply integrated within those core systems. And
No, that
so,
makes sense.
I think that's that those two factors, right? The lack of relevance of large generic models, and then the unique, I don't say unique, but very different nature of hospitality from a setup perspective, I think are what's going to make it hard for those external companies.
You used the word consolidation a little earlier, where you were talking about the opportunities and threats. I mean, do you see a scenario where you've used the word platforms as well, where we'd start to see there becoming a core group of hotel specific platforms that kind of coalesces, the industry coalesces around those as the core platform to give you that clean data, and then other elements, whether internally developed by those companies or through API partnerships, just access it, but they become like that core platform of choice.
Oh, consolidation is inevitable, right? The future of hotel tech isn't just about collecting more apps, it's about consolidating to a single intelligent platform that
Mm-hmm.
powers the entire guest journey. Now, does
Mm.
that mean that one provider is going to provide every bit of tech on that platform? No. Is it going to be the situation we have where the average hotel has 20 tech providers? Also, no, right?
Hmm.
AI accelerates consolidation,
Yeah.
right? The effectiveness of AI relies on clean consolidated data, right? And the only way you truly get clean consolidated data is to accelerate that trend towards single platform solutions. Look, there were companies that helped the industry make huge strides in terms of integrations over the last, let's call it like less than 10 years,
Hmm.
right? But a lot of those integrations are still what I call, or not I, but what we refer to as MVP, but in the bad sense, minimally viable product integrations,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And so, you need to have truly rich integrations that, get all of this data talking it back and forth, because unless you have that, you don't have a single source of truth. But
Hmm.
it goes a little bit further than that, right? Because it's very difficult, but it's not entirely impossible to build a single source of truth today.
Right.
The problem is hospitality is still provided to a guest by someone, let's say, standing at a front desk, although that's not as common,
No, I know the point you're making there.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Relatively underpaid, massively overworked,
Hmm.
right? And that person does not access any of these systems that consolidate data. They access a property management system,
Yeah.
right? And so that, at Cloudbeds, we see a future where the term PMS actually becomes obsolete. So I
Interesting.
don't, there are tech companies that will become obsolete. I think certain systems,
Hmm.
systems that we've either held as unshakable bedrocks
Yeah.
or systems that have only been around for not that long. They're like, oh my God, these are like the cutting edge systems. Those systems will no longer be able to survive as standalone systems.
Got you. Got you. Interesting. I did wonder, hence the question. um, expanding on that expanding on that point, but from a different angle. Um, you could argue that the major hotels missed a trick with the
Mhm,
whole OTA scenario, that if they'd kind of recognized what was maybe on the agenda and worked more collaboratively than competitively, they could have
mhm.
actually solved something. Do you feel that agentic AI might be something that doesn't bring them together, but maybe starts to create a bigger divide,
Mhm.
both from an industry point of view and tech provider point of view, between the major brands and then the smaller groups and independents? Because I mean, we're seeing, I'm reading about groups that are developing their own tech that they're building onto their data. We're seeing investment from some of the large groups into their data and AI teams. I mean, if I was sitting there and looking at everything that was available to me, however it's owned through
Mhm.
franchised or whatever the structure is, it's still data that exists. If I could come up with a way of working towards a clean, consolidated data platform, and I'm working towards that over the next 3 to 5 years, and then building on top of that my own agentic AI solution, and I'm a
Mhm.
major brand, that would seem something that strategically might seem a
Right.
sensible thing, or they were being advised to be doing. What's your
Oh,
what's your take on that?
100%, the brands are going to build their own AI agents. It is practically inevitable that they will, right? They
Mm-hmm.
have the resources, they have the data, and they absolutely can do it. And look, this could create a big, digital divide, right, between the big brands and the smaller independent hotels, especially
Mm-hmm.
if powerful AI just remains exclusive to the large properties, right?
Mm-hmm.
The problem is, I mean, I mentioned this earlier, brands have so many interest groups and so many stakeholders, right?
Yeah.
And look, at the end of the day, the brands have really one metric that matters to them: NUG, net unit growth, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we
Mm-hmm.
can look all the talk we want to talk. That is what matters to the major brands.
Yeah.
Everybody else that then is part of those brands has different metrics, that they're responsible for. And so, you know, look, I think that while they sort of then figure out how they do this and satisfy all of those competing stakeholders, right? You know, the strategy of a company like Cloudbeds is to counteract that by democratizing technology,
Hmm.
right? You know, we want to build enterprise grade solutions and make them accessible. AI should be an equalizer, not a tool of division, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that is possible. And if you just look historically, you know, drop back 15 years ago, only the brands had access to like revenue management,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Good point. Yeah.
You know, now I can be a 20-room hotel and I can work with providers like Flyer or Duetto or Ideas or who all of these, and they are arguably I'll upset a few folks, arguably better than some of the, you know, the custom built solutions that some of these brands are still using,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And so, you know, I think when you start throwing AI in that, I think you're going to see an accelerated curve in terms of independents being able to compete if it's done properly. There are technological hurdles for sure. I personally think you're probably going to see the greatest impact coming from smaller brands that own more of their assets.
Hmm.
Because if you have an owner who is the operator, they then have true they have the incentive, they
Hmm.
have the ability to push down decisions,
Yeah.
and they can really harvest those benefits. The problem is there's a lot fewer of those companies than there were,
Yeah.
even
Yeah.
6 months ago or
Yeah, I
five
was
years
going to
ago.
say, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
certainly 5 years ago. Yeah, there's a
Yeah.
lot fewer. Yeah, without a doubt. One of the other things that I always think about is that, embracing, as I say, I can't remember which term I am, but I'm not a doomer or a gloomer or whatever, which one it
Right.
is.
I think it's
Um,
doomers and zoomers, or
yeah,
maybe zoomers is generation. I
something
don't
like,
know.
yeah. I tend to try and lean into the technology with a degree not of skepticism but of wary, because if I don't know everything, I tend to want to embrace it where I can, but then I'm also aware that there may be some risks that I'm not fully conversant with or aware of. And I think that's one of the things that concerns me slightly. That if I'm a hotelier and I'm reading a lot about this, and I want to go down a path of exploring this a lot more, but data is one of those areas that seems quite fraught with a number of issues that exist, both from a compliance point of view, both from a security point of view. That just stepping into that world feels as like there's minefields everywhere. Can you give us our take, because that's very much your area of expertise? So if I'm sitting there, what are the bigger
Yeah.
issues I need to be thinking about, that if I was even going to go down this route of having something investigating my data, I need to be thinking about what I'm doing with that data first and foremost?
Yeah, so look, I think there's sort of four risks that hoteliers really, you know, face if they're going to venture into AI too early, right? The first one is
Hmm.
not having a clear strategy, just chasing shiny new tech, right, without
Yep.
defining a clear problem, to solve, right? The biggest risk with AI isn't the robots that'll take over, it's that you'll invest in a robot without knowing what you want it to do,
Yeah, it
right?
just sits there,
Start with
get
the
dusty.
yes, start with the problem, right? Not the technology.
Yeah.
Don't go to your providers and be like, I need AI. And trust me, I was talking to a couple of consultants earlier this year who are like, yeah, I've got owners coming to me and telling me I need to get on AI. Cool. What are you trying to solve?
Yeah. Why?
Look,
Yeah.
I think hoteliers that try to start investing without thinking first about data integrity, we've already
Hmm.
discussed, right? Data integrity is critical. AI is only as powerful as the data it learns from, right?
Yeah.
And so if you have garbage data and then you put AI against it, right? Actually, it'll really amplify your existing issues and just could potentially make things worse,
Yeah.
right?
That makes sense.
And then, kind of similarly, hoteliers really need to beware of AI washing, right? Look,
Right.
there's a lot of vendors out there that are, taking smart approaches to this. But there's also a lot of folks that have a lot of pressure to make goals from investors and their stakeholders as well. And so, is it AI or ay? This is kind of my line there, right?
Yeah.
So lastly, it's just really important for hotels, if you're ready to, be an early adopter, right? Focus on solutions that address specific critical pain points, right?
Mhm.
How do you reduce manual tasks? How do you improve guest communication? How do you drive direct bookings, right? These are the things that hotels can be focusing on now,
Yeah.
versus I don't know, some robot that stands at what used to be the front desk.
I got you. I got you. And where do things like data compliance come in? I mean, in Europe, it's obviously GDPR is a big. I mean,
Mhm.
if I've got an agent that's doing something with that data, how I'm a hotelier. I don't necessarily stay abreast of all of this stuff. What issues like that on a compliance point of view, and then also on security? We've seen a lot of breaches both within major groups and also major non-hotel companies,
Mhm.
that you would expect to be very secure.
Yeah, yeah, no, look, I mean, every really deadly sword has two sharp edges, right?
Hmm.
And so, it can, in the same way that AI is super powerful for good, it can be super powerful for bad as well,
Hmm.
right? And so I am not, that much of a, the data expert where I could say here's a couple of steps that hotels can take, but I
Sure.
think that's that really does create a need for hotels to work with trusted partners, right?
Hmm.
Who do understand this, who do take data seriously. I know that, any individual can go, heck, if you want, you can get a private version of Claude and put it on your own server, right? That is possible. And you could, figure out how you're doing that and then not sending data back into Claude. I know some people that do that. But I generally speaking advise against that. It's kind of funny. Maybe I've been around for too long, but whenever I hear a tech provider say built by hoteliers for hoteliers, that to me is like a massive red flag.
That's an interesting statement to make.
Yep, it is. I'm sure there's a few people that'll listen to that, and I'm waiting for the emails.
I just want to pick up on something that you said there about consultants coming to you earlier in the year and said, "I've got to get into AI." One of the media event organizers can all be guilty of
Hmm.
focusing on the newest shiny tech, which promises the world. But I do question sometimes that from a hotelier's perspective, um, it can cause maybe confusion.
Hmm.
It can be a distraction, certainly, and also at this time of year where we're starting to look into 2026, early thoughts about budgeting, it might create some hesitation around what I should be doing, and that is then magnified by confusion or distraction. If I'm probably asking you to repeat partly and then maybe expand on the answer here. If someone came to you and said, "What should I be considering when I'm looking at my budgeting for next year? How do I take these steps along this route, taking into account preparedness for this new technology?" What would you be advising them?
Yeah, so I'm going to be a little vague here, not because I don't think that I could provide concrete answers, but because one of the things that I love about hospitality is that hospitality is everything from, 5 rooms on a beach to, 5,000 rooms, connected to a convention center,
Yeah, yeah.
right? And
Good point.
everything in between. So, I think, but thinking broadly and what can apply, I think there's a couple of things. First is think about that shift from tools to an ecosystem, right?
Hmm.
How can you stop budgeting for a patchwork of apps and invest in a unified platform that's going to be that central nervous system for your hotel's operations and a launch pad for your future in AI. Right
Mhm.
now, are you going to like hoteliers are also used to just buying things off the shelf? So are you going to like sign a contract in January of 26 that has all of that? Probably not. But you need
Mhm.
to be thinking that way,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
in order to think that way, you need to ask the right questions, right? Don't just ask what's the latest AI tool, right? But start thinking, asking questions like, how can I consolidate my data to become AI ready, right?
Mhm.
Which platform provides the best foundation for continuous innovation? Look, there are a few folks out there that could wake up on a Monday and say, yeah, I'm going to run a marathon in a couple of weeks. Well, most of us schmucks need to,
Put a
spend
bit of training in.
weeks or
Yeah.
months training, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like that's just not a thing. And and so it's time to start training, right? But you're not running the race in January,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Prioritize your foundation. When you think about that, talk about consolidating data, right? How do you think about, are you using a cloud-based platform with open APIs? If you're still working with an on-prem system, God help you, right? Or
Mhm.
if you're working, I mentioned this earlier, right? Connectivity, MVPs, go in and start asking your tech providers, how good are my integrations? I know system X integrates with system Y, but what kind of data is flowing? Is it flowing both ways? All of
Mhm.
those kinds of things,
Mhm.
right? And then lastly, in order to start getting some quicker wins, right? Things that you can say, hey, I'm going to start investing and, we need some ROI because that's what this is all
So
about, right?
that's the game.
In the short term, focus on automation and efficiency, right?
Mhm.
Look for investments that, can automate processes, reduce your operational costs, and sort of how much hotels depend on manual labor. At the end of the day, we're having this really cool conversation, by the way, Trevor. This is so much fun, but we're not in a vacuum, right?
No.
And I'm not getting into politics or any of that kind of stuff, but there are global pressures as a result of policy decisions that are
Yeah.
going to, impact labor costs and labor availability and the demand in certain markets is going to change based on all of these things. And so, I think it is really important for hotels to be thinking about, how they can smartly use AI to lower their costs, and increase efficiency in the meantime.
That sounds like some very solid advice. I'm conscious of your time.
No,
They were all the
pleasure.
things we wanted to cover in this conversation. I think you've given a lot of food for thought. And I really do. And I think I also value your openness because, you haven't deliberately thrown anybody under the bus, which is good, but you have also highlighted the fact that, hey, hoteliers should be questioning, probing, investigating, and asking why are we doing what we're doing,
Mhm.
and challenging where it's necessary to challenge. So thank you. It's been a very enjoyable conversation. Really appreciate it.